Call this meeting to order. Kathleen Allen.
Here.
James Bell.
Here.
Amy Callan.
Here.
Tom Chapa.
Here.
Brian Chetney.
Here.
Brandon Legault.
Here.
Sam Tripp.
Here.
Ellie Manicha. If you would all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, for the floor to the public, I have one person signed up, Tom DeCastro. Tom, if you could come up front, please.
I am up front.
Oh, you are up front.
Yeah, can't get much closer, I guess. First of all, I want to apologize to all the people in the audience that have been listening to me. I hope you're as disappointed as I am with the lack of action that's taken place so far. So I've decided to take a little bit of a different route, and maybe it'll be easier for you to understand what's been going on. You go back to when Amy and Jim ran for the Board of Education. They put up signs with the Buccaneer head on their signs. They received a letter saying they needed to cease and desist, which they ignored, which to me looks like an attitude of where they think they don't need to address the law, or they think they are above the law. And as we know, and I've brought up several different times, we are breaking the law right now. Jim Bell's still on this school board. I don't care how many names you want to call the job he's doing. It is what it is. And the lack of leadership on this board to meet board policy is appalling. It's gone way too long. We need to start pushing. And that's exactly what I intend to do in the future. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Board of Education. There is 2 dates that we're asking either to be canceled or moved. One is November 6th. Several of us are going to be at a conference. And January 1st being January 1st. And we didn't know.
It might be a fun one.
I'm free.
And I was not sure what the board members would like to do.
How would you like to proceed on those?
I mean, I would imagine since we don't know what's going to be on the agenda those 2 days, I'd say we just change the date, and then if we don't need them, then cancel. To just cancel it outright.
So when we've done that before, so the option is to have, we can have two, back-to-backs don't work that well because we don't generate the agendas quick enough. If we could choose another night in the same week, that's probably preferable, but what are
No,
those
on the
dates?
November 6th one, there's 4 days that the conference is, so it's
Okay.
kind of hard to set
Okay.
to move that.
Yeah,
And the January 1st, I mean, you can move it. to
January, that's an
the
easy one.
Right, okay.
Do you want to start by moving the January
Yeah.
2nd date to,
Yep.
or January
January
1st
1st
to
to January
January 2nd? Is
And
anybody going to be away?
It's my birthday.
It is?
Yeah, we'll have cake. Okay. I'm good. I'm in for the cake.
And then November, you want to just schedule, what's the open November date, Karen?
13th or the 27th.
Right, so, I mean, this last time, didn't we have something where we said, we just kind of
We
rolled up the
scheduled it.
agenda, we pushed it back and do the same kind of thing, and then if we find that we don't need the.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm
That's
saying,
kind of
just
what it
schedule
is.
it and then.
We'll
we
schedule
don't
it
need
as needed. Which
There's
November
actually
date is
There's
it?
actually 5 Tuesdays in October, so if you wished it a week early,
What would that be?
the 30th.
And would that still give us
There's
2
5
weeks
Tuesdays.
between October, both October,
And then
all
there's 4
three October
Tuesdays in
meetings?
November. And then if you do the 30th and then the 20th. I don't know, I'm just thinking there's 5 weeks
Yeah,
in
right.
November.
Yeah, so it gives you the
October,
break.
so take
Okay.
your time.
Cover.
You want
So,
to do that?
so from the 6th to the
October.
what?
October 30th?
6th to the 30th.
Oh, okay.
October 30th.
Yeah. So it'd be 6, 20, and 30?
October 30th.
Right.
Instead of the November 6th.
Yeah.
What
And
are
we
the other
still
two
have the
October
October
dates?
2nd and the October 16th.
Got it. Okay.
And then we'll move the January 1st to January 2nd.
Yeah. that sounds good.
Could I have a motion, please?
So we're having 3 meetings in October then?
But
Yes,
they're all
sir.
2 weeks,
Still
they're all 2
apart.
weeks apart.
Got it.
Yeah.
Brian motioned, may I have a second?
I'll second.
Tom, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And then the November one stays at the 20th, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Next on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Yep. Before I forget, I did want to mention the pageant of champions on Saturday. I had a flyer, but I forgot to bring it down. The pageant of champions is, and it's the 40th anniversary pageant of champions. There's also a reunion celebration on Friday for Marching Buccaneers staff and graduates that I would talk about. I also wanted to mention an initiative that Lisa, I forgot to bring the flyer, it's on my desk. Do you want to just talk briefly about that?
Sure. So we're partnering with SUPAC this year, which is the Syracuse University Parent Assistance Center, to bring a 5-part series on special education and really supporting our families as they engage in the special education partnerships with us. So just a 5-part series throughout the year, every other month, starting in October. So it'll be great. We did not send out the flyer yet, OCSD all. We wanted to make sure you had the information first.
Right. I meant to talk about the flyer and
Yeah,
when
no,
I was
you're fine.
printing the PowerPoint, I forgot it on my desk, but we can eventually send that flyer
Absolutely.
out in transmittal.
Yep, I can forward it to you.
Great. Okay. All right. So tonight really is the first of a series of presentations that I'm going to make with help of other administrators, cabinet administrators. And originally tonight's presentation was going to be on graduation rate. And the more we got into the development of the presentation on graduation rate, the more important I thought it was to really give more of a historical perspective on student achievement overall in our district, so we know what are the contributing factors that got us to today. And then when we take a look at graduation rate and some other demographic changes in our district, in our October presentation, you'll have a snapshot of where we have been and what student achievement has looked like in Oswego over time. Some of the initiatives that we have put into place, and some of the hard work that's happened, particularly over the last 5 years, when New York State started reporting out student achievement data more regularly and put interventions in place for schools who are what are referred to as in accountability. And we had several schools, including our entire district, that were in accountability and were considered focus schools 4 and 5 years ago. And so we thought we would just tell the story over the last several years in terms of where our district has been, the efforts that administrators and teachers have made to make improvements to get us off those watch lists, and then bring us up to today with how we've laid the foundation over the last 4 years for continuous student improvement. So then when we get into graduation rate, you have more of a foundation for what it is that we're talking about. So tonight is really a student achievement history and overview. And Carrie and Heidi actually really worked with me on this presentation over the last week. And we dug into the archives of DTSDE school improvement plans, and we looked at our comprehensive teams. We looked at the state report cards, and then our own district level data, so that we can kind of give you a pretty accurate snapshot of where we've been, so that we know where we're going. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start in 2005-06. So we're going to go back about 12 years and talk about the accountability format that the state might have been using during that time, what the accountability designations were. The next column would be what schools or the entire district fell into a designation of accountability, and then identify the areas whether they were ELA and math. The other acronyms that you're going to see Carrie and Heidi and I talk about are, which I have a hard time seeing on the screen, but all would mean all. ED is economically disadvantaged, so those are students who fall under the poverty line. SWD is students with disabilities. And sometimes you qualify under different designations, either in ELA math or in all. And so there's also a designation for other small demographic groups that Carrie might talk about a little bit. So Carrie, do you want to walk through this slide first?
Okay, if you roll back where this all started, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act started in Johnson in 1965. So we're going all the way back then, when the federal government decided to give states money and gave them certain guidelines of how they could give the money, how the money could be used within the state. So we're all familiar with No Child Left Behind with Bush in 2001. That's when it became imperative that states had to use academic measures and participation measures in order to receive any state funding, federal funding. So that's where we came in with having to look at our ELA, our math, within our 4th and 8th grade, and our high school graduation rate, and ELA and math, and science in our secondary. Science was also in our elementary schools too. So we kind of rolled back till 2005. When we first started to hit the radar with the state, you can see in 2005, the high school was tagged as school in need of improvement. That was the first time they hit the list with the all group, which is all the students together, and then the subgroup of economically disadvantaged. The state defines certain subgroups that they watch. You have to have a cohort of 30 or more. So in this year, our economically disadvantaged group was higher than 30 students, obviously, at the high school. So we were tagged as not meeting it for both ELA and math proficiency. So we didn't make the cutoff of scores that we have to make. Performance indexes, you have to have so many students at a level 3 and 4, which is 65 or greater going up. So I'm not going to get into all the calculations. It's a distinct formula they use in order to get that. OMS in that year was in the second year, so they were in a need of improvement year 2 for their students with disabilities. So in 2004-05, they had already been identified as the subgroup students with disabilities for needing support in ELA and math. Roll that down to 2006 and 7, you can see that OHS, the high school, did not make it off the list for just their economically disadvantaged. So just in ELA. They did make the mark in math, but they didn't make it in ELA. OMS made it that year for their SWD, so they, because of a safe harbor formula, so they came out as improvement year 2, where their math, they got off the list. Roll that to 2007-08, we have OHS still did not get off the list for ELA, so they moved into what's called corrective action year. OMS did not get off the list with SWDs, went back on the list with students with disabilities, so because they hadn't stayed 2 years off the list, they got moved to corrective action. In the meantime, all our elementaries were in good standing. Okay, and that's a lot to take in.
Yeah, that's just as much responsibility.
And
Yes.
yeah, that's what I was just gonna
Yes.
ask. So the other students were
Making the marks.
making the marks,
what
it was
we needed.
only these
Yeah.
categories
Yeah.
that were listed.
Because Amy, if you look at 05, you'll see that in the ELA and math, it says all.
Right.
So we were on an improvement list for ELA and math for all.
For all.
But we also had a subcategory of economically disadvantaged, below the poverty line students were also. So by 2007-08, it was only students with disabilities that were left in ELA and math, and for math it was year 2.
When they label us with that designation, I mean, do they demand us to do something? Do they support us? Do they give us something? Do they-
We're gonna get to that.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
good question. Improvement plans.
Yeah,
and
well, like-
evaluation group. It came in a little bit later.
And they do, if you get to such as a corrective year, they do send out state reps to go through, to walk
Say
through
this.
with you and have meetings. So we did go through that whole
So
process.
Carrie, I don't know if you said this earlier, so then if you're looking at, so say for example, in any of these years, so with the all population or whatever, like, what is the percentage of kids who need to score a 3 or 4 in order for them to, like, if you're looking at the whole picture?
Okay. What the state had, or what the system was set up for, is called a performance index. Now, this gets into calculations in order to, which I have quite worked right now. You're getting into a calculation where the federal government said all schools, in order for all students to succeed, will be a score of 200. In order to get to 200, the formula is you get no credit for a level 1. You get level 2 added in once, level 3s and 4s added in twice, divided by. Okay? So you want to move your score to a 200 to get perfect. So your PI, your performance index, each year the state put out actually a chart of where they want schools to move to meet that PI. So we didn't move to that mark towards 200 because I don't know if you remember historically, George Bush said by 2020 all our schools would be perfect. We'd all be 200s. So that was how our New York State decided to kind of move us along, was they gave us targets to move on. Okay? So when you look at a region score 65 and better, would have been good for our students to make the mark. Did that answer your question? It's kind of.
Yeah, I made another one on that, but thank you, yeah.
Are you going to point out, Carrie, I think the important thing on this slide also to point out is the graduation rate target.
Oh, I'm sorry,
then
yes.
was at 55%.
Yes.
So it's very, it was more, you had to get to a graduation rate of 55%.
And that's set by
in order
the
to
state,
meet
that
criteria.
55%?
That was the state's set was 55.
And it's much higher now when we get to that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
Yep.
a little bit easier
I-
to reach that.
Yeah, and did they set that just because of where we were at in this corrective action designation?
No, it's probably.
It was
That- that's a-
nationwide.
across
And
the
that's
board.
kind of like what you were
Designated or
saying,
not.
how they were,
Okay.
like, it was a
that's where
progressive
they
move,
started.
Yeah.
saying everybody by
Gotcha.
2020 is gonna be
Okay.
at 200.
Would be probably 100% grad
Right.
rate, yeah. Okay, so, next slide, again, you can see we're still within using the ESSA with No Child Left Behind. OHS was planning for restructuring. That's when the state did come up and make a visit. We had to go through some of our actions, our curriculum documents. They did some classroom visits. OMS was in corrective action. And again, all our elementary stayed in good standing. And again, it was the SWDs and the economically disadvantaged. OMS that year did make the performance indicator. So you can see on the next year, 2009-10, they came off the list as in good standing. OHS stayed on because they still didn't get the SWDs on. Okay? 10-11, we had all schools in good standing. OHS was removed from improvement in 10-11. Our graduate rate at that point had to reach 80%. So that's when the marker, 10-11, is when the state moved it up. Okay. Okay, moving on. Maybe not. Battery done?
I don't know, do you want me to just do it?
Hit enter?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So 11-12, this was the year that we actually had this is the first time we had 2 elementary schools pop onto the list for being identified for our students with disabilities because they had low performance 2 years in a row. Okay? OMS identified again for SWDs. Our other schools, you can see OHS is now in good standing. Okay?
I think it's important to point out too, that our performance in ELA has historically been lower than our performance in math. And you can see that throughout this presentation.
Okay, now, 2012, 2013, if you remember all the hubbub about Race to the Top.
This is what a game changer. This is when the state went after all the funds. They had to write a creative plan in which we were tied to different ways of looking at our annual, yearly progress. So they created, they put everybody, all the 700 districts in a pool and picked the lowest 10% throughout the whole state on any of the categories of, subcategories of groups such as economically disadvantaged, our special ed, Hispanics. If you had one of those groups that fell on the bottom, now the state came in and had what was called focus status. They changed the titles. No longer is it school in need of improvement, corrective action. It is now called focus. So they changed the game, they changed the names. If you look at what I have written on there, what they held us accountable to in 2012-13 was 10-11 to 11-12 data. They used student growth scores to calculate this. Our high school became identified for economically disadvantaged in both ELA and math. Layton became recognized for Hispanic subgroup. And in this case, it no longer became a subgroup of 30 students, it became a subgroup of 30 tests. So if you have 15 students, they take both ELA and math, you automatically have those 30 tests. So it became a game changer for how schools had to look at their data. OMS also was identified, but at the time, the district gave us the choice out of 3 schools to pick 2 to work with. So at that time, administration picked the high school and Layton to work with. Okay. Oh. Sorry, it worked. Yep.
So that really brings us to another era of change, and that started in 13-14. So now we're getting used to the whole focus group status and the term accountability, schools that are in accountability. And in that year, we were still falling under previous year's data, and still we were under focus designation as an entire district, as well as Layton and Oswego High School. OMS slipped to a LAP level, which is a lower level designation, which means they were making improvement, but still were identified for the white subgroup, which seems funny, you know, and their economically disadvantaged students. 14-15 is when I came to central office as the assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction. I started working with Carrie. Laura Ryder was our director of literacy. We had a different special ed director. And the state ramped up a lot of accountability for districts, not only to go to Albany for training, and they started ramping up the use of what's called the DITSE rubric. And those of you that have been on the board for a long time, on and off, and certainly those teachers and leaders in our district that have been around for quite some time, remember all the work we did around the DTSE rubric, which I'll talk about in a minute. Any school that was in accountability, so for us that year in 2014, it was district in focus, Frederick Layton in focus, and they had already been working, the high school in Layton had been working for a year with Kathy Chamberlain and with their building leaders. Julie Berger was the principal at Layton at the time. She really laid a strong foundation that was picked up the following year by Larry Schmiegel. Oswego High School started their work with Brian Hartwell, and then the following year we had Aaron Noto, and so a lot of work was happening. In fact, most of my time in my first year as assistant superintendent was spent on accountability, writing comprehensive reports at the district level, and also working with principals and comprehensive teams in those 2 schools who worked really hard to get out of accountability. And those reports had to be created and submitted to the state for review, and then oftentimes, and it certainly happened in our case, the following year, the state would come in and do a full state review, or what was called a state-led review. They would send in their big wigs, no nonsense, show me this, I want to see a cohort of students, cross-section of students. I want to meet with a cross-section of students who are economically disadvantaged. I want to talk to a cross-section of staff. And they would hold focus groups to talk about what perceptions of the kids were about a lot of things. quality of instruction, and it was based on the diagnostic tool for school and district effectiveness, or what we refer to as the DISI rubric. Those who've been around for a long time know that we talk about that constantly. So in 1450, in that first year, graduation rate was still at 80%. We were in accountability for our district. We were in accountability for Layton and the high school, and the work had already started and then ramped up that year. As I said, we had a full review during the 15-16 school year. In the spring of 2016, the New York State Education Department sent a comprehensive team to attack our school, to come into the Oswego High School for a week, to come into our district for a week, to review the work at Fitchie Park and OHS as well, and it was grueling. And the work paid off in the long run. But we were under intense scrutiny during those years. We had DTSDE school improvement teams. Jem certainly was a part of it. There are other staff members that may or may not be here today that worked really hard, particularly at Fitchie Park, Frederick, Layton, and OHS, to meet the criteria in order to show, and they were interested in effort. The interesting part of the conversations with the New York State Ed folks is we would say, well, we're doing this, or we're doing that. And they would say, that's great. That's a great indicator of effort. But we want to see what's the impact of that. And so it got us thinking differently about impact versus effort, and changed the way that we think about school improvement, which leads to, stay away from that. That was in 16-17. You'll remember that, some of you will remember that our district was in good standing. Fitchie Park slipped down to lap status, which is a lower indicator of need. So we started to see improvement. And that was the year that I became superintendent. We started asking our building principals to create DTSDE teams, school improvement teams, to bring the collective intelligence of their schools together and create plans for improvement for each of the 7 elementary schools, middle school and high school, based on a modified DTSDE rubric. So what Carrie and I did at the time is we took the DTSDE rubric, we pulled out the domains of the rubric that we felt applied to schools as well. For example, family engagement, community engagement, some of those elements. And then principals pulled together their comprehensive DTSDE teams, regardless of accountability. So now we're talking about all 7 schools, because we found such success with that rubric when we were in accountability. And those of you that have been on the board several years will remember that when we took our board meetings on the road into those schools that first year, those were the school improvement plans that the principals presented to you. So those plans were based on the DTSD rubric. Following year, 17-18, all schools were now in good standing. The district was in good standing. And for this year, we're not sure yet. We're waiting for the list to come out. Now we're moving into ESSA. That Gary's going to talk a little bit, just briefly, but there'll be a subsequent presentation on ESSA, which are the requirements that have changed in New York State. Every Student Succeeds Act is a new law that guides the work that we do in our schools. There are some accountability measures for schools and for districts, and we're going to do a presentation on that in a couple months. So you can see that a lot of work went into the improvement that got us off the list.
Before we leave the historical perspective, I've got a couple of questions. Carrie. Carrie, those grad rates were set by the state?
Yes, the accountability, the column, that's what the state said.
Okay. Did we meet those grad rates throughout those years?
No, that's another presentation that we're going
That's
to show
actually,
you.
we're going to do that in October.
Yeah, we did not meet the graduation rate at all times.
Okay.
So
But we're
that,
gonna have
that's
a
a, yeah.
presentation on those.
Yep.
Okay.
That may have contributed, Sam, to when the high school was in accountability. That was one of the diagnostic measures. It was graduation rate.
Are you gonna pull the data from the same time?
Yeah, we're going to
Yeah,
do
I'm
a
going
10-year
back all the way.
look back.
Then one other question. All those years that are listed on the historical perspective, the only things that really change in the district are we have new kindergarten kids come in, we have seniors graduate. Why did why was there such a change in designation every year? Is there an explanation for that, or is that just chalked up to the state, how they do things?
Well, there are different variables.
I was gonna say, you guys changed.
We had different
the way-
assessments
Yeah,
changed.
yeah, yeah.
Graduation reached, expectations changed. Common Core standards came in, the modules of instruction,
Yeah.
staffing changes. Jen?
The testing also changed, the company that they were using, the format that they were using. I mean, it's really trying to hit a moving target every single year as far as the performance indicators. And
Right.
that's the part that Carrie's too polite to tell you about. It truly is. It's trying to hit a moving target.
She's absolutely right. And if you think back to my presentation on opening day, I made a pretty bold statement to teachers that when we were a 70, 75, and 80% achievement rate in ELA and math, and then suddenly we went to the Common Core and the modules of instruction, and suddenly we're at 35, 40%, I'm not convinced the quality of instruction in the elementary school is different than it was then. I'm not convinced. Just because 80, we didn't go from our kids are the same. They keep changing the target, changing the assessment. And it is frustrating.
So then you would say like other districts statewide are seeing the same type of thing that we're seeing here?
Yeah. At different levels. If they were in the 90s, they may be struggling in the 50s now, or if they were in the 70s, they may be in the 40s. There's definitely a gap based on the creation of the exams, and coupled with the expectation of SED.
And then I just have one other question, because we all see the reports that come out from like, US News and et cetera, that rank schools, like the top so many schools, or the lowest 50 schools in the state, or what your college readiness scores are. Or like if you're looking to buy a new home, it will score your schools with a number 1 through 10. So I know that those are, but just on having read a lot of those articles, that a lot of that is based on scores such as these.
Absolutely.
So, like when you look at, just for example, like, I'll use like the real estate thing, because I was just looking at real estate the other day. But if you look, like like the high school, I think is a 5, and elementary schools are like a 3. So how do we get our schools to be higher, so that when folks are moving here and they look at those scores, I mean, we all know the good things that we do here, but I'm just saying from an outsider looking in, like how do we?
How did they come up with that
I'd have
number?
to see, yeah, what is it held at? Is there, do they also hold poverty in the mix? What are the markers? What did they say they?
I don't know, that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I know
it's-
when I read these
yeah.
articles, then they,
Every
they'll
study's
say,
different.
this is what it's based on. So I don't know what that would compare to, if that's this what they're talking, I mean, I could bring them in, but
No,
it's the same thing.
I
with
think maybe
girls.
the other criteria they use in there, if you look at it, and they're odd questions, reviews, what people have said, response, because they'll break out administration, and also test scores, and you may find that the numbers are high in one area and low in another, but they also use some criteria which are just generally negative comments as well. So next, because I was looking at the same thing, a number of them, and then looked down to the criteria they used for coming up with those numbers.
Okay. And the same thing for like the college readiness, and that, like, I know we were like
Yeah.
49 out of 50.
And they
For-
look at how many students take AP courses. It depends on the
Yeah,
study you're
there was a
looking
whole
at.
bunch of different.
Yeah, you have to look at what are they actually collecting, what data are they collecting, what's accessible to them.
And those are the questions that we ask ourselves every day.
Right.
How can we overcome what our product is in the program that we're developing, so that we have continuous improvement, like you saw happening between 2012 and 2016. So they're good questions, and
Because I think it's
So
something
we're
that probably a
looking
lot
at
of
it.
people see and they read, and a lot of people are like, how did we get to
If
this number
they're using that as
here?
a tool to make a decision, then we should figure out how
We
to.
should figure out what we need to do
Yeah.
to change those
Right.
numbers so that.
I think the
big-
next.
Go ahead. Two really big variables are students with disabilities, which impacts some of those reports that you see about per pupil allocation. That's a big one for people, is students with disabilities, very expensive. And the other one is the impact of poverty in your community. And we have some data on that for next month's presentation, overlay of free and reduced lunch on graduation rate. over 10 years. And there are some surprising things in that data that we'll share with you too. Heidi, did you have something?
No, I
to
was
add?
just gonna say, it's a nice segue, your questions are a nice segue to what the next part of the presentation really has to do with that. Nicely asked.
Yeah.
There you go.
So what we really did is 3 years ago, we took a critical look at where we've been, we looked at all the data that we've shared with you so far. Luckily, we had some historical perspective on where our district has been, because we do have some long-serving administrators in our district, not only in building level leadership, but also in our instructional staff. They come here for a career. Carrie's been in central office working with data and literacy and math for a long time, and my history in district is long. So what we asked ourselves next is, what can we do to look at where we are and create sustainability and opportunity for improvement? So that brings us to this slide. The first thing we needed to do is know what we believed in, so that started with the creation of the district mission and vision, something we talk so much about. The district and mission and vision is branded across our district, and then we use that to decide how do we build a comprehensive educational plan based on what are the specific needs in Oswego. So after the creation of our district and mission, we created a comprehensive district educational plan team, or a CDEP team, that came together to take a look at what were the needs of our district, what were the two critical items that were impacting the kids in Oswego, what did we need to do? And that team identified two things, and one of them came directly from the DITSE rubric, and that is students who come from different types of homes come with baggage that we have to address every day. Teachers and principals know that better than anything. So we created a comprehensive long-range educational plan to focus on the planning and delivery of instruction. Those of you who've been around a long time know that I always talk about equality of opportunity, regardless of what school they go to. And that was the purpose of using the DTSD rubric to do school improvement plans, standardization of what we're doing. That led to the creation of the comprehensive district educational plan that had those two elements that we'll talk about in the next slide.
Dean, who was on that team? The CEP?
Teachers, principals. We actually brought facilitators in the first 2 years. The first one was Lorraine Gershman from City BOCES, and then last year it was Roseanne Bain from City BOCES. Principals, teachers, support staff, community members, board member. So it's pretty comprehensive. And even within the instructional rank, we look for a cross-section of elementary, middle, high, classroom teacher, content teacher, school psychologist, guidance counselor, special area. So pretty big team. Then, did I miss something here?
No, I think there were 29 members.
Yeah. So we created the team, and then we brought them together for full days as a pull-out workshop, so to create availability for all the teachers to come and do this. And then we rolled that out into the creation of building level improvement plans with goals, which were based on the DTSD rubric, and those are the ones that we talked about earlier that were presented to the board.
Okay.
So that left, let me just summarize. Carrie's going to go into element 1 of the long-range educational plan, which is social, emotional, developmental health. That came from the DTSD rubric. And the second target was to standardize the quality of our planning and delivery of instruction, which is explicit direct instruction, or EDI. Carrie's going to talk about social, emotional, developmental health initiatives that came out of our long-range plan. And then Heidi will talk about EDI, and then we'll wrap this up.
Okay, so, as Dean said, one of our markers that we wanted to talk about, rally around, was social, emotional development health, because we know that our students are coming to us to learn, but if they're not emotionally ready within the classroom, they're not going to take away anything that the teacher is trying to deliver or help them learn. So we started with bringing Jackie Usco. She was an expert from Albany, and she provided our initial training for the entire district on a staff development day. She explained to us about the ACE study, which is adverse childhood experiences. It's a study that was done that talks about how those trauma events actually cause problems with the brain, how the brain develops and how the brain reacts within any learning environment or any kind of environment. So the trauma does play a big role on what is going on when our students come to us every day. So she actually led us through the whole idea of what it does to the brain and within the whole district. And then she met with small groups, our counselors and our school psychs in a different session after that. So she met with us twice. She came to the district kind of to guide us through how to lay out what we were going to do with trauma-informed, building a trauma-informed culture. The next year we brought in Dr. Donna Ryder. She's from St. John Fisher, and she actually did also a staff development day where she took the next step of understanding what trauma does to the brain to looking at how children react within a classroom setting with expectations of when they're in the moment of having to try to learn, and they're not with the teachers, they're not listening or understanding. We actually invited everybody to that, bus drivers, secretaries, the entire district attended that conference. Then she actually scaled back and worked just with the principals on several pullouts. And then she went and pulled teams at the high school and Fitchie Park and worked with teachers, counselors, and the administrators at those schools. So she worked with administrators and then built 2 other teams to work and to kind of give them strategies, what to do with the students.
15.
Yes, this was last year.
Oh.
Donna Ryder was last year, Becky used spoke this year.
16, 17, and 17.
So how many, I feel like we talked about this in the board meeting back then, like how many hours she gave to the district for all of this training? I mean, roughly, was it like?
Donna's, it was quite a bit. Sam, do you remember how many times she pulled out?
Like most of the year.
Yeah, half days at least.
Monthly meeting, yeah.
Monthly.
Okay.
And then we also last year at the same time let the administrators, each building principal led book studies on a book called Lost at School by Ross Green. Amy attended the March 2nd conference where Ross Green presented to us. We also had a number of other members within our district that went to the same one that Amy went to. So we, in spring of 2018, we did hear Dr. Green speak. So beginning this year, we are going to host, we're bringing a Ross Green consultant to our district November 9th to host for the entire county. So our teachers will participate, and also from other school districts will sign up to come and listen to the speaker consultant. It won't be Ross Green because he's in Sweden that day, so it would not get him. But, and in addition to that, Diana Proano is leading us in training where we're going to take the ALSUP, I can never say that, assessment of lagging skills of unsolved problems, in order to look at a student and look at a checklist to kind of problem solve with an entire team how to get any student that is having behavioral problems so that they can regulate and be attentive in class. So Diana's actually spearheading that. There are going to be 15 sessions that she's going to gather teams with. Do you want to speak to the work you've done?
Yeah. It's going to be a webinar. It's 15 sessions webinar, and it'll be 2 teams, secondary team and elementary team. And they'll be trained to do the ALSUP, and they'll also be trained in what they call Plan B. And that is having the conversation with the child. So the ALSUP is really having a team of other teachers or professionals discussing the child. And then it goes to Plan B, which is having the conversation and developing a plan with the child. So that's the whole concept. So they'll be trained in the webinar, and then they'll also be asked to do LSUPs. And I got an answer today actually from Liz, and so it's like they'll have to do 3 to 4 LSUPs. Send them to the trainer that's in the webinar, so they become better at it. You know, it's like practice, and they'll get feedback. And then they'll also have to do 5 or 6 Plan Bs, conversations that they're going to tape with children, and get feedback from the trainer. So it's a pretty heavy training. It's not just the webinar. They're not just listening. They're really participating.
How
So
many are you going to do? How many teachers?
each elementary building it'll be the principal, and the principal will pick a participant for the elementary. And in the middle school, it's 5 people, and in the high school, it'll be 5 people.
And when they do the LSIPs, and the Plan Bs, those are hypothetical, or they're on their actual students?
No, it's real. It'll be real
They're on
students.
their real students?
Yes.
And it's a very in-depth
Yes,
process.
it
So
is.
it's good that people are getting training
Mhm.
on the worksheet, which looks deceivingly simple,
Mhm.
but it gets into some serious depth about each student. It really does help identify where they're lagging skills, so then you can put a plan in place
Yeah.
and support them as they get back to the classroom.
And
We
then
see the
once-
lagging skills as skills like in math or ELA. It's the same as in social development.
Right.
So they're missing these skills, and he talks about how you just pick one, and you've got to work on one skill at a time, just like you would with any subject.
Yeah.
So-
I remember that from all, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
So then from that, after the one teacher and one principal, well, 5 in high school, middle school, then they train the rest of the
Yes,
staff?
that'll be in theory the next part of it, once we
Okay.
get this. Yeah.
So-
At least be able to lead the team in each of the buildings and
Mhm.
support the work.
Because ultimately, remember from the videos, Amy, that we saw, they're all set teams in schools, and we saw a demonstration of what the conversation piece would look like and what the Plan B piece would look like. So similar to the types of teams we have now in our schools, we have data teams, we have inquiry teams, we have SBIT,
Yeah.
school-based intervention teams, where collective staff, support staff, and folks come together to talk about specific needs of students and then generate plans for intervention. Sam, were you going to
I was
say
just
something?
gonna say, and also, the district is supporting the book studies of Lost in School, which a good percentage of the teachers have taken, so this is not like shockingly new information, and they'll have a little bit going into it at least to have an understanding of the process.
And the process, when you get started, is slow, but once they take off and they understand what they're doing, remember, it's not every student that has to have this plan.
And it's also not every teacher, because I remember
Correct.
being at the
Yes.
conference, and I remember hearing people like, oh my gosh, this is one more thing we have to do, like,
Right.
how are we gonna teach all these kids, and then take the time to stop, and then, but if you're saying so then a teacher would identify a kid who would need this, and then that child would go to this designated team at whatever school, and it wouldn't fall on the classroom teacher
Well,
per se.
It might funnel
They
through
might be
SBIT.
part of it.
It might be
The
funneled through
teacher-
what we have now, which is SBIT, school-based intervention team, and teachers make a referral to SBIT. Maybe they get to a certain, and you can jump in, Diana, but they get to a certain threshold in terms of behavior, and then
Yes.
maybe
I think that the person that's chosen to do the webinar, they will, they're just going to have to help the teacher do the LSAT. The teacher has to, the one that's closest to the student for that subject. So, in elementary, it's going to be the classroom teacher, whereas in the high school or middle school, it'll be different. It'll be the whatever subject area. They'll have to guide them, so it's kind of like they're trained in this, so they know how to help them fill it out. So eventually,
So they're kind of like the facilitator to help the teacher.
yes, they'll
step by
show
step.
up and, yeah.
which kind of goes to the new coaching model that you see across the public ed in New York State and across the country now. Higher levels of coaching, so you're embedding literacy coaches, instructional coaches. This would be kind of similar to that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Look at what.
Okay, so also what we're working on for this year, at the secondary, actually at the high school, we're going to have mental health first aid training. We're also, Dean can speak to this one, TIC.
Yes, this is going to be the next county district initiative. I talked a little bit about the first countywide district initiative with all 9 component school districts, which is the PK3 literacy initiative that's being launched this year. The next one that we're going to look at is called TIG, which is the Consortium on Trauma, Illness, and Grief in Schools. And it's a training that helps us to identify the work that needs to go into schools to address students who come with a traumatic background, a chronic or serious illness, or also the grief that might come from the loss of a family member. And all 9 districts are going to go to this training and then roll it out across our county.
And then this summer, if you read your on-board newspaper and you saw the whole middle article was restorative justice, Pat Wallace actually attended that and was trained in restorative justice. He spent 4 days in Albany this summer doing this work, and he is going to bring that forth within his building and then eventually turn it out to the entire district. He is there was only 4 people from the county that attended, somebody from Fulton, and actually 2 others from city that BOCES attended. So he's going to carry that forth. And then lastly, we have responsive classroom training, which we started at Layton this summer. Kara had 4 days of responsive classroom in her building. And next summer, we're going to move it out to Riley and then Kitchen Park.
What is responsive classroom training?
Kara?
So when Carrie sort of brought this to our attention, and anytime I have the opportunity to thank her in public, I do, so this is another opportunity to thank her for bringing that to Layton, because it's quite an undertaking financially, as well as, really that follow-through piece. So to answer your question, responsive classroom is really, the way I sort of interpret it, and the way that my staff sort of worked with it, is that it's really making sure that kids are able to talk about their feelings. Kids are really able to have time to have opportunities to sort of use their bodies in their learning so that they're participating. There's a lot in responsive classroom. They call them energizers, different pieces that kids can really take some time to take some ownership in the classroom. So a lot of what the teacher does is more being the facilitator, and so that the students are really running those classrooms. But that doesn't just happen. And so what Responsive Classroom did, and what it did for the training for my staff, is it really taught them some skills to put in their toolbox around what can they use so that they can be the facilitator, so that kids can be more independent working on their own. And not just in group work, right? Because we've been doing that in education for many, many years. So it's more than that. It's really kids taking the lead, kids helping other kids to monitor their behavior, to monitor their academics. And so not only did we have the training as a PD like all PD is, but we really got to experience. We got to be the students. We got to participate in all the parts of that responsive classroom, so that when we went back to teach it, not only did we learn about it, but we actually experienced it. So, and that's why it was 4 days versus just, here's 1 day and here's the book, you go read it. So that's what made it a little bit different, that we got to experience it. And 75-80% of my staff got to go. So it was a big number to play.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to introduce this. If we roll back to the work of the Comprehensive District Educational Plan team, and I don't know if I punctuated this enough, but the work of those teachers and staff members pointed to 2 things we really needed to do, and that is address the needs of kids that come to us. We have to know what drives their behaviors. We have to understand better and know how to address the behaviors that they exhibit. And a lot of the things that we've talked about in the last several slides are about that, social, emotional, developmental health. The other thing that came out of the long-range educational plan team was a need to standardize instruction. How do we plan and deliver instruction that's really good and that can be applied across all 7 schools? So Carrie talked about trauma-informed environments, and the second one Heidi's going to talk about is explicit direct instruction, or EDI.
So we've been talking about, reading about, or practicing EDI for a number of years.
especially as different schools came into and went out of accountability. It was a big piece for the middle school and high schools DITSI plan, and it was a big part of our discussion with the state representatives. Because one of the most important things EDI brings is consistency in teaching and expectations. So that a student who might be going to math gets the same or very similar, perhaps, expectation of the teacher in terms of participation and presentation of materials, types of questions they're asked, and that it's very explicitly taught, hence the title. And what we always fostered was have a discussion with the student. It should not be a mystery what you're teaching that day. Objectives should be clear. They should be written in a certain format so the students can recognize that as they move from content to content. And it became part of our discussions for our teacher evaluations and our non-evaluative data collection. So we created a variety of different walkthrough tools, and we've settled on using the same one now, so that any of us who are doing teacher evaluations as we walk in and out of the different set of buildings, we can expect to see very similar setups in the classroom, whether it's second grade or 11th grade. Over the last 3 or 4 years, we've provided a variety of different times, dates, and opportunities for our current faculty to be trained in the course. And then last year, I believe, we started at New Teacher Institute, where it becomes an embedded piece to onboarding, if you will. When we hire you on, it's our expectation that you understand what EDI is. And so it starts right from New Teacher Institute. They get a copy of the book. There's discussions with Sherry Beck, who leads our mentoring program. They talk with their mentors about it, and there's some pull-outs throughout the year in order for them to complete the EDI training.
So is that at 100% back in the district?
We're not at 100% yet, but our hope is to be there. We're very close. So sometimes it's a matter of finding a time where, let's just say, for example, a coach who might be coaching 3 different sports. It's been a little difficult for them to be able to consistently come to training. So we actually, when we met with the principals last week, we had a great collaborative discussion about, okay, everyone gets the kind of bi-yearly update about who in your building has been trained and who's remaining. So now how do we make this accessible for everybody who's left when we don't exactly want to do a pullout because that creates a sub shortage. So we had a lot of different creative thoughts, and we're working on, I hope, by the end of this year, 100% of our current staff, and then each year our new faculty will be onboarded and have the training. And then Dr. Walsh, who you may have seen in different venues over the years, she has provided a lot of observations, non-evaluative feedback, and some great support to teachers who are either new to EDI, who just want a set of eyes. Hey, I'm halfway through the training and I'd love the chance to practice something. Come on in and see me teach a lesson. And we've used her sometimes in our improvement plan development. So it's nice, again, to have another set of eyes, so it's not just the building principal and or me or Carrie, but Chris is fantastic at presenting information in a very non-confrontational, collaborative way. This is what I saw. What did you think? How can we improve in this way? And then tie it back to EDI.
In addition to Sherry Beck, who's provided EDI training over the last 3 years, Don Simmons really was the building principal, as a building principal, who really was the leader in EDI when we first were all becoming aware of it. And her staff was trained in EDI in-house by Donna, and they implement EDI quite successfully. And she's done a lot of PD with the EDI, as has Sherry Beck, as has Chris Walsh.
We can do PD on Saturdays and
Yeah.
Sundays.
That was the suggestion.
We did try Saturday.
Some people said, well, what about if you tried it on Saturday? And we said, okay, we will do that. And we're trying to give every opportunity for people to come to the training.
We used to do whole language training on Saturdays, remember, not in the old days? Okay, and we apologize for going long. We are planning these presentations, you've got 10 slides, 12 minutes. But I think it was really important to lay the foundation. And this is the last slide, which is going to lead us to the rest of the story. And we have talked about a lot of the things that are happening this year already, particularly in trauma-informed environments. But some other things that are happening, some other instructional initiatives that will be worked into our long-range educational plan. That team will reconvene again this fall and talk about the enhancements that we need to make the EDI, to talk about the roll-off of the Ross Green work, and also some other things that we're engaged in. I've talked already about the year-long collaborative effort that was last year when we charged a group of comprehensive team of teachers in PK through 3 to create a literacy model based on the work of the Reading League. And I also shared with the board that at the time, and I should punctuate this again, the work of collaborative teams in Oswego City School District has been the model for what's happening in the county. And you see it in our long-range educational plan. What are our initiatives this year? Our primary initiatives are PK3 literacy intervention based on the work of the Reading League, which launched the county-wide initiative of PK3 literacy based on the Reading League. The other county-wide initiative that's being launched this year, and Carrie talked about it, is trauma-informed environments. That started in Oswego. And now we're hosting the Ross Green workshop at the Superintendent's Conference Day here in Oswego. So our teachers and administrators are doing a great job. And we're setting the pace, because 3 or 4 years ago we said we were going to stop buying solutions, and we were going to start creating them. We weren't going to buy programs and packages. We were going to come together and make our instruction better. And so that's just a little shout out to teachers, principals, and support staff for getting us where we are. And we're looked at by the county as being leaders and innovators in instruction and addressing the needs of our kids. So certainly this year we're rolling out our PK3 literacy model based on the work of the Reading League, and this work became the catalyst for the countywide initiative. We're also going to be doing a lot of work with Ross Green, and we're going to reconvene the literacy task force this year to look at a framework of instruction, a literacy framework for grades 4 through 6. And more to follow on all of that.
Dr. BOE, would there be any more items for the superintendent's report? Next, we'll move to the consent agenda. Minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of September 4th, 2018. Minutes of the special Board of Education meeting September 14th, 2018. Special education report. Treasurer's consolidated report July 2018. Extra classroom activities fund report Oswego High School August 2018. Extra classroom activities fund report Oswego Middle School August 2018. Would there be any questions? Could I have a motion?
Make the motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is curriculum with Carrie Platt.
In curriculum, we only have one item. A is marching band trip to Fairlawn, New Jersey. Permission for the marching band to attend Fairlawn, to go to Fairlawn High School in Fairlawn, New Jersey. Friday, October 12th through Sunday, October 14th. The students will be fundraising with the band parents organization in order to fund all students, make sure all students that want to attend are able to attend. The cost is only 3 subs for that Friday, October 12th.
Any questions? Motion?
Move it.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next will be personnel with Heidi Sweeney.
A, teacher tenure recommendation, Eric McCovey, technology education at the middle school, effective 9/19.
Any questions? Motion?
Move it.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
B, professional staff recommendations, resignations from 2 extra comp positions, Mary Kuskowski, sophomore class advisor, and Heidi Sheffield, buck bulletin advisor.
Any questions? Motion?
I just have a
Oops,
question.
sorry.
Does this happen a lot this time of the year? And does it disrupt anything in terms of transition, or how do they handle that?
Well, it doesn't typically happen so soon in the year, but some different people moved around over the late summer. Normally, we put extra comp postings out in the end of May, beginning of June, to get them board approved, starting to trickle in towards the end of June, beginning of July. And because there were some spots that opened up, some other people either were interested or may have been approached to say, hey, we thought you did a really good job at this extra comp that maybe wasn't as big, busy, important / great responsibility as this one. We'd love to see you maybe take a shot at this one. And so you actually see Mary's name.
Right, down below.
Yes, down below.
Yeah,
It doesn't cause a lot of disruption because we tend to, as soon as we get one to move, it creates a spot for the next person to move in. Pat Wallace and I have been talking a lot about the Buck Bulletin because enrollment was pretty low at the start of this school year from course selections. So I know that he's trying to be creative and that maybe we look at a blog, maybe we look at a different way to interest some additional students and bring them in. And Heidi did a great job for the Buck Bulletin for a number of years. Sometimes bringing in another advisor just amps up the enthusiasm for it, and we might start to draw a crowd, but we're really working on keeping that program intact. Was it because of the tradition of the Buck Bulletin?
Oh, yeah, I think that's great. I was just more concerned that the kids are just getting back to school. If they're used to something and all of a sudden it changes up again, do they get the consistency and continuity through that?
Absolutely.
Can I have a motion, please?
Move it.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
C, professional staff recommendation, leave of absence, Ashley Deming to serve in the second title. She was just approved at the last meeting, and she's taking a leave from her Riley elementary teacher position.
Any questions? Motion?
Make the motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
D, professional staff recommendation, probationary teacher, Shane Evans, special education at the high school, effective 10/1, tenure due 10/1/22. Be it further resolved that the probationary expiration date will depend on the individual teacher's APPR ratings, and therefore be it further resolved that to receive tenure, the individual must receive overall APPR ratings of effective or highly effective at least 3 of the 4 preceding years, and therefore be it further resolved that if the teacher receives an ineffective composite or overall APPR rating in their final year of probation, they will not be eligible for tenure pay.
Any questions? Is this a new position or?
No, this is a replacement for early year retirement.
Can I have a motion?
Move it.
Ryan, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
E, professional staff recommendation, probationary teaching assistant, Megan Totterdale, TA level 1 at Riley.
Any questions? Motion?
Move it.
Second?
Second that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
F, professional staff recommendation, regular substitutes, Maria Conaway, elementary education at Riley. You just saw that we created an opening and now one of those now ones. And Ryan Lavner is a teaching assistant at the middle school.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Motion?
Again, is there a way that you can designate on these so that we know, what's a new position and what's not?
So if you, I certainly can, but if you were to open up the attachment to it, it actually has on the instructional appointment resume, it will say new position and there's a checkbox, or replacement for, and then there's a name. So in this case, Jessica Slate, who is moving into a teaching position this year from her TA spot at the middle school, has created an opening from her leave of absence, and that's what Ryan moved into.
But we could do that.
But I can
We
put a
just
little.
put a little
We can
asterisk
highlight
on
it.
it so you
Yeah.
can see it.
Highlight it.
Just so that you know,
That'd be great.
what's a new position.
Uh-huh.
You know what, I would probably say we can come up with a system where the majority of these are replacements. So new positions, newly elevated for whatever reason, I can make a designation for those, because those are more the, not the
Exception.
norm.
Could I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Wait, I just have one question. So Ashley's position that we approved last week is for the AAS teacher at the high school. It's a 1 year?
It's always a 1 year because it's grant
It's grant
funded.
funded, okay, that's
And we
good.
never know for sure early in the summer whether we're gonna be able to fund that or not. So that's why it comes kind of late in the year, beginning of a school year.
But she's a different teacher than who had the position last year. Is that
Correct.
Okay. I'm just saying just because of if she's leaving Riley, now she's leaving the spot, and then she goes to the high school, and then does she go back to Riley, or does she stay at the high school?
Right. It'd be one of those spots
It
until
goes
it's
back to
transition, you know?
Yeah, it goes back to an elementary. When people take a leave of absence from either elementary or secondary, there's no guarantee that you're going to go back to either the same building or maybe the same grade level. And we have those discussions ahead of time because it depends on student enrollment and need, and likely they go back to the same building, but not always.
Could I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
G, extra compensatory recommendation, KPS, Kelly Moxley for elementary student council advisor.
Any questions? Motion? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
H, extra compensatory recommendation, summer retroactive, Rachel Henderson worked one additional day than we had previously approved her in counseling on master schedule one.
Is there any questions? Motion?
Move it.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I, extra compensatory recommendation, OHS. As presented, there's a selection of after-school and detention. There is a trio of people splitting the responsibilities for junior class as co-advisors, a new sophomore class advisor, and a new student council co-advisor.
Any questions?
Is it the junior and senior class, because of their responsibilities, why their stipend is more than the advisor for freshman and sophomore?
Motion, please?
Move it.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
J, support staff recommendation, resignations. Linda Dowd, school monitor, part-time at the high school. Jackie O'Brien, teacher aide, part-time at Minetto. So this is to clean up the fact that she had taken a teaching assistant position that we approved the rescission of, and now then she needed to actually resign from the held position. And Lisa Yurden, food service helper, part-time.
Any questions? Motion?
Move it.
Second?
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, support staff recommendation, leave of absence. This is to end Teresa Bertoliva's FMLA. She's a custodian at the middle school, and she returned to work effective April.
Questions? Motion?
Move it.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
L, support staff recommendation, probationary, Nancy Fenske, custodian at Riley, and 3 teacher aide part-time, Rachel Heath, Nicole Sams, and Deborah Stevens.
Any questions? Motion?
Move it.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
M, support staff recommendation, provisional, Patricia Perfetti, school personnel assistant. This is a reclassification of her position at the Ed Center. I know there were some questions, and I just wanted to open it up to have a discussion about that process, maybe answer any questions that you have. So,
Yeah, I
yep.
had some questions. I thank you for give us the duties.
Yep, that's
statement.
kind of an example of a new position duty statement. I work closely with Nancy Stereo at City Hall whenever we have to do what's considered a desk audit, which is taking a look at the current title. Perhaps the title has evolved, perhaps there are new responsibilities or changed responsibilities, and we always want to ensure that the correct appointed title is the work that the person is doing.
So the need for upgrading the position came from doing the desk survey, and it stated that she was working out of time, doing more work than what you
Yes, yeah,
you did
so
in your time.
Patty, currently, until you take any action, is a senior typist and has been, for quite a while. And over the last few years, a variety of pieces kind of have come together. The fact that we had 2 long-term clerical support staff in the personnel office and 1 retired. Since then, we've had 6 come and go for different reasons. Some people come and then bid up on other positions because the other desk is typist, wasn't typist, we reclassified that as well. One person wanted to go back to a school building, came in during some of our clerical movement in 2016, tried personnel. Yep.
So are you down 1 person? from
Yes.
What you were?
Yes.
There's been a position eliminated in that department. How long ago was that?
We just approved that, 2 meetings ago, I think,
The resignation.
yeah, resignation.
You have the resignation, we didn't replace that person.
Not yet.
Not yet.
That she's picked, yeah.
Yeah.
Other question is,
Yep.
I assume that this salary is an increase
Yes.
from what you pay now with upgrade.
Yep.
Where does that extra money come from?
So it comes from Nancy's breakage pool, and that tends to be where we have those types of funds when a position were to be
So Nancy has a breakage pool.
replaced.
Which makes sense.
Nobody
I'm glad
accesses
she
that
does.
but the
That's
superintendent
right.
and Nancy,
That's
yes.
good business.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome.
Any other questions? Motion?
Move it.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And support staff recommendation, change in status. Mackenzie Carr, teacher aide at Riley, and Shannon Germain, teacher aide at Veneto, both going from 3-hour aide positions to 5-hour.
Any questions? Motion?
Move it.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And O, our substitute and temporary employees.
Any questions? Motion?
Move it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is finance with Nancy Squires.
Do you want me to take all of the tax things together or do them separately?
That's fine.
Okay.
Pull them all together.
Yeah. A through D are our annual resolutions for the board to approve our tax rates. What's important here is that our true value on tax is $20.46, which is the same as it was last year. No increase to the taxpayer. And the equalization rate in the town of Scriba has gone from 86% up to 100%. And that really helped us stabilize the tax rates as well. The town of Oswego is still at 96% equalization rate. This also allows for the warrant to be drawn, which will be signed, and allows for Joyce, who is our tax collector, to make any changes or adjustments to the tax roll as necessary. I also want to point out that our tax office is moving to the warehouse. The county will no longer be collecting our taxes this year. We have an office set up for tax collection. The hours are 8 to 1 and 2 to 4 daily. We also are offering online payments through e-checks, and credit card payments we are accepting this year as well in order to have more convenience for the taxpayers to pay their taxes.
Nancy, how are you gonna staff the payment office at the warehouse?
Joyce will be over there daily. So we've
No
created.
new employees, it's just-
No new employees, we've created an office over there for her. Actually, it's more secure than we've had even at the Ed Center. So she's all set. Postcards will be going out to all of the taxpayers. We've had them created by BOCES, and they will be being mailed out hopefully this week to also notify them. There was also an ad in the Palladium Times, thank you very much, about the changes in the tax as well, the tax collection.
Thank you.
Any questions? Motion?
Move it.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And then E is the acceptance of a donation from New York Schools Insurance Reciprocal, that's our insurance company, for $500. That was to purchase refreshments. That was actually for opening day. We didn't need it, but we were very grateful for it. So we're going to put it away for another event that the superintendent has on the road.
Any questions? Motion?
What?
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next on the agenda is the Facilities Committee discussion. Would there be any discussion from the Facilities
Just
Committee?
that we are, 6A is pretty much 100% done. I was over talking to Jamin today about it, and that's pretty much complete. 6B, they started to paint today. The ceiling should go up on Thursday. They're looking for a completion date beginning of November, around the ballpark in that place. But it's really starting to come together over there, and it's really...
And I talked to Pat Wallace last night, and the only delay is going to be for doors and windows, and they'll be coming, not knowing when.
Right.
Everything else
delay.
No, not that one.
Well, it's possible.
Next is student rep discussion. Do you have anything tonight? And next is items from the board. Would there be any items from the board tonight?
Yeah, I just got a request from Nancy. Nancy, several years ago, I know we have a contract with our attorney, where we pay them a monthly stipend for their services. But I also know that if we go above and beyond that, then there's extra costs. Several years ago, we used to get I believe it was monthly, maybe every 2 months, we got a report that broke down what those charges were, what their service was to us, who requested the service, and what the charge was, and how it all added up in the end. With the board approval, is it possible that we can start getting that again,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
if everyone else is in agreement?
Or if you give me the criteria that you want the report in, I can do that for you monthly.
Okay. I always found that helpful, and, people are calling attorneys and scheduling attorneys. We need to know the cost to that.
So he's looking for the billable hour sheets.
Yes, that's the way it was before. You probably
Yeah,
still
that's
have.
it. Ain't that last year?
I think the year before, or the last
It's
year.
a couple of years since we.
Would there be any other items?
I just, well, go ahead. No. No.
I just have a couple things, just a note from, I believe you all got the email, but I'll just say it out loud because anybody can go to this. The Oswego County School Board Association, one of the speakers that we put together, it's going to be on September 26th at City BOCES, and it's going to be Randy Griffin, who is our, of course, fire chief here and director of emergency management in Oswego. He is going to do a presentation of all the ins and outs of school safety, and it's going to be open to anybody, parents, teachers, principals, all of the board members got invited, the superintendent, and I think it's going to be really great. So just wanted to put that out to all of you.
What time was it again?
6 o'clock at the City BOCES boardroom on the 26th. Yep. And they kind of want to RSVP, so if you want to.
I'll be cross-country again.
Oh, okay. If you do, if you're interested, or any of the board members, just shoot me an email or a text or whatever, and then I can let them know, just so they can prepare, because they're going to have refreshments and whatnot. The other thing I wanted to say was, I know, is Donna still here? Oh, I just wanted to say, because whenever you get good news, you want to share it, but I got a phone call from a community member, and she had gone to a couple of different schools, and so she left me a voicemail about Fitzhugh, and she's like, oh my gosh, I have not been there, and I loved that school. I felt so good when I walked in, the way it was maintained out front looked beautiful, and everything inside, she just could not stop talking about how nice it was, so I don't want to make sure that I share that with you. So, yeah, definitely. So, and then the only other thing is just for board members, I know Karen sent out a couple of dates for our mid-year evaluations and end-of-year evaluations, and I don't think anybody's gotten back to you yet.
No, not yet.
Me? Okay, so if you guys could do that, that'd
I
be
wanted to
great.
point out too that Karen was asked to give a hard copy
Yes,
of the draft of the board goals.
yes.
And also draft of mine, that Karen, you printed
Oh,
my
yes.
17-18 reflection. So it's
Oh.
a different document, and it's probably, I sent it to you, so you have it by email, but you may not have it saved on your,
Okay. Yeah.
maybe you could just email that. Well, no, they already have it, but
Yeah.
we can distribute that.
I was just
Everybody has
thinking
it.
just,
We have it like-
Yeah.
well, like, I know, but I know that a couple of you guys had said that to have the hard copy of things
Yeah.
is easier, so that's why I asked Karen to do the district goals that I typed up, and I
Yeah.
emailed them all to you guys. I just wanted you to have a hard copy.
Yeah.
I had them last week or the week before,
I
but when
just wanted to make sure I
unexpectedly
pointed
ran
out
out.
that that was
Ran with her.
last year.
Yes, and I just noticed that.
Yeah.
So,
Speaking of evaluation, Amy, this doesn't apply to Kathleen and Tom.
yes,
But last year we completed Dean's evaluation. Each board member did an evaluation.
right,
And I assume that you correlated them and shared with Dean.
yes, yep, we had it.
Is there a possibility that the rest of the board can see everybody else's evaluation? I don't see any reason why I need to know I know how I evaluate.
Right.
I'd like to know how.
Well, yeah,
everybody else-
nobody put their names on it, so I don't really know whose was whose, but.
Well, I'd like to see them anyhow.
Yeah, I could do that. I could even show you the report. I
And-
mean,
and
I
I
know
think-
that New York State, the way that New York State School Board, like in all the information I gave you guys when we started the evaluation, their way that they recommended that you did it was everybody turned in their evaluations, the board president compiles the information.
But the board
and then,
president
but
should-
not the actual evaluation form itself, just the findings of
But
it.
the board president should sit with the entire board and talk about those evaluations before he shares them with the superintendent, so that everybody, the entire board, I don't know what everybody else, I know how my evaluation was.
Right.
I think the entire board should know how the superintendent was evaluated. We have those of us who were on the board at that time, there's
Right.
no way of knowing what the evaluation was.
And, no, and I think that that's a good point, and that's really why from the beginning have been pushing to get dates slated on the calendar, because as we all know, once we get going, if the dates are already on the calendar, it's virtually impossible to find dates that work for everybody. So I think that was one of my main reasons in trying to say, hey, let's have our evaluation dates, everything on the calendar, so that those kind of things can happen, because we were way behind schedule for our mid-year evaluation, we were way behind schedule because of the date factor, so I definitely,
Well,
I
it's
hear what
good
you're
that we
saying,
get
and
to
I
jump
think
on it now.
that in the future, that we have those dates slated, so that we all know that that's gonna happen on this date, and so that's why I need you guys to respond back to her, and we can have those dates, and we all know going forward that that's blocked
But I
out.
think those evaluations should be shared with the entire board. Everyone should know what the other evaluation was.
In the past, we've always done it that way. In the past, we would all compile, when you were president, when I was president, we compiled all of those, we made copies for everybody, so everybody got to see the comments that each board member would make and then compile it together. So it was gone over with the board first, and then the board president.
And then the president would sit with the superintendent.
Yeah, but we were all privy to what, I mean, because you want to see what other people's feedback is, so.
Yeah, I don't think we ever, in the past, ever saw
No,
from any other
we
president.
never saw them
So then
from
you had to
anybody.
sit down with each one of the board presidents historically to go over a evaluation, so when you were
When
president?
I was president,
Yeah.
yes. And then with the previous superintendents, I did the same.
The
Gave
format,
them
the
format
format this
copies
year
of
was
all
different.
format.
The- What was good about this year is that we sat in July
Mhm.
and went over it.
Right.
But I think individual feedback from board members would be good for me as well. I liked the format we used, but it was a summary.
Mhm.
It'd be nice to
So
see.
you didn't see the individual evaluation?
No, I've got a packet. Amy and I met for an hour and a half.
Yep.
We went over the rubric. I wasn't familiar with I didn't know what the format would be. I knew it was different.
Well, no, I did
but we
give
went
copies to
over-
everybody prior to everybody on the board. I gave you guys all the copies and we talked about it.
I don't
at a-
think I ever got a copy of it, but regardless, we sat down in July and went over each of I don't even know if we're supposed to be talking about this, but we can. I'm comfortable with that. We went over each element in each domain.
Yeah, like what I did is I
She
went
gave
through,
me a
like I said, I
summary.
didn't know what you said, I didn't know any, because none of y'all put your names on there, so I just went through and I tallied the numbers, and then on his sheet, similarly to like how I typed up the goals, I just had it all organized based on whatever the domain was, and then, you know, say there was however many threes, however many ones, however, so I mean, he saw all the scores. He just didn't see the actual evaluation sheet, which really is neither here nor there, because I tallied up all the marks on the printed out sheet, so.
But was there room for comments on those?
Nobody commented. I had one comment.
You didn't comment?
I think I did.
Then I know which
You
one's
always
yours now.
What kind of, I'm curious to see what the format was.
It was a format that's.
Is it the
that's-
same format?
No,
that
it's
we're using?
provided
No,
by
it's
New York
different.
State School Board Association. And
Okay.
and a lot of other districts use it. They also have one that you can do it all electronically. And then all of the data can get sent to me, and then Karen and I can sit down and, there's a lot of different ways, but it's what a lot of school districts.
I think that's one that we all need to look at and see what format we want to use with him. You know, and I have you agree with it too, so that we can, because I mean, I know there was one year that we did it and there was only 3 numbers. It was 1, 2, and 3.
You
and-
do so many
And it was just
different-
such a small, you couldn't, it was really difficult to evaluate somebody on a 3 FE, you know.
This
scale of
one
3.
was pretty
This one-
comprehensive. It had a lot of different areas, and then it also had an area where goals would fit in. You know, these goals that we created, as well as the dean's, superintendent's goals that roll up into these. And then you measure and say, did the mark get hit with this goal? Did the mark get hit with that?
See,
goal?
I
but
think
that's
that was,
the
I think
format
that
stuff.
was one area, I gotta go back and look at that all again.
And that part I didn't even include in it.
Okay.
Because we
I was gonna
never.
say, I think that goals
Right.
piece was
Because
missing.
we were behind.
Because we were behind
On-
because
on
we
all-
couldn't
so
get
you
dates and blah,
take
blah,
that
blah.
away
Right.
from any of them.
But my goals were submitted and reflected on it. But they weren't in the evaluation.
They weren't in the
So there, we need to tighten it up.
Right.
Well, and I mean, the formats that we've used in the past, in every area, there was room for comments. We always had a million
There was
comments.
on
from
this
There was on the
every
sheet
person.
too.
Yeah, it was.
People just
But-
didn't comment.
See, that's surprising to me, because
Was surprising to me
it was
too.
always comments on everybody's that they turned to.
See, and I guess, and I was under the assumption, I mean, I really worked hard last year trying to get this organized and to find and to share with everybody what the format was, because I was under the assumption that you hadn't previously met with board presidents in the past
I
couple of years
didn't
to
get,
go over your.
I didn't get the feedback on the 2 previous years until much later.
Right.
Right, which was the.
After the-
That was the benefit of this year, although I wasn't familiar with the format, and like, I feel like I'm having a post-observation conference. But that's okay. My goals, I mean,
We're not talking about how you did it.
Yeah, we're just.
Talking about the
No, no,
process.
but
So
when
it's
I do my goals, at the end of the year, I write a comprehensive summary where I reflect on each of the goals, and I write a narrative in bullets, and I submit that to the board by June 15th. And that should be one of the elements. You know, the format, and then that too.
And if I could add one more thing, I sent an email out late today for the audit committee, just suggesting a date for the next audit meeting, September 26th at 4:30. If you guys could just let me know if that works in the time.
I'm good.
I'm fine with the meeting without being able to work for all of you. I really cannot that day, but if you guys are available, I'm more creative, I think it is.
Yeah, I'm good.
So if you two are good, I'm fine.
And then you can
I know
contact
have-
Lisa?
Yep, I included
Yes.
her also,
Yeah.
So
so
does
I'll
that,
wait for her
does that
response.
mean if I got there, somebody else got anything there?
Anybody, the rest of the board can always be
Oh, I
there
know.
as an
Just
observer.
can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other
Anybody
items?
else?
I do, let's get time quick. Over at the high school tonight, from 6 to 8, I know that Deb Casper has would meet the teacher night. We talked, and she's got quite a few agencies over there that are there to help out for faculty and for parents, students, whomever. So just give them a shout out over there after the high school. I know she put a lot of time and effort into that.
It's a replication of what the county did out at City.
And we don't always historically have a super turnout at the high school level, so we're trying to pull in more pieces that will draw people who have different needs.
Great.
That's okay. Yeah. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I remember we were talking about Latin. We did our ad hoc thing at the end, and I brought up, I said Mrs. Wales was my teacher, and it was actually, her maiden name was Mrs. Wales, but her married name was Mrs. Young. It was her Miss Wales, Mrs. Young. Ruth Young, she was my teacher at high school. Charlie Young was her husband, who was a social studies teacher. Yes, board, great people, and I just wanted to clarify that, and also to know that my Latin was reversed, because mea culpa was one that you taught me, so mea culpa. So I just wanted to put that out for Mrs. Young. All right.
Any other items from the board? Would there be a need for executive session tonight?
Yes, collective bargaining. Collective bargaining. Who's in the voice for that? Ryan
Okay.
has to motion.
Sam said
Yeah.
personnel too.
Oh. Could I have the motion, please?
Personnel.
Can we stay here? In this room?
Can I have the motion?
I think we need that personnel that executive.
Okay. Collective bargaining and personnel. May I have a motion?
Move.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You may move to executive session.